Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be jazz. Akwachi, Osinachi, Namnukwa, Osinachi. One man, Osinachi, Akwachi, Osinachi, Mama, Osinachi.
wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Àwọn ọmọdé wọ̀nyí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be that. I'm watching. Hey, Osinachi, I'm no kwa, Osinachi. One man, Osinachi, I'm watching. Hey, Osinachi, mama, Osinachi.
Hello, Matthias. Hello, Charles. Welcome, Matthias and Charles. We'll start in a few minutes. It's good to see you and to meet you here. I hope you can all hear me well.
Yes, we can hear you.
My time says 5:30, and I really look forward to listening to the papers. So I think we'll start early, but let's just give everyone else 5 minutes to join in, and then we'll do some housekeeping and we'll move straight to the papers.
àwọn yìí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
A ní wọ́n kéré o, wọ́n kéré o, wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa, àwọn ọmọdé wọ̀nyí kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa. Wọ́n kéré sí nọ́mbà wa.
Not because I suffer fast, not because I pray and fast. No be your show, no be that. I'm watching. Hey, Osinachi, I'm no kwa. Osinachi, one man, Osinachi, I'm watching. Hey, Osinachi, mama, Osinachi.
All right, everybody, good evening. I think we should just start the conversation. Hopefully the rest of the members will join us while we're on. First, just some housekeeping. My name is Omolola Olarinde. I teach economics, and I'm really excited to chair this session on economics, labor, and wealth, especially seeing that there are like 3 or 4 of them at this LSA conference. And so I'm glad to see that there's so much to talk about on the subject. We're going to be having about 15 minutes of presentation for each speaker, after which we can interact with the audience for about 10 minutes. And we'll still have about 20 minutes at the end of the session for additional comments that could be addressed to any of you. I don't know, welcome on board, Charles, and happy to see that you are interacting with Budapest. That's one of my backgrounds is with Budapest, so I'm happy to hear that you're interacting with Hungary. Hello, Matthias. Do you think you'll be willing to switch spots with the people the presenters who are not here early enough? Are you able to do that? Because, for example, I can't see, we're supposed to start in the order in which you're arranged with Boluwatife, but she's not here, and neither are the 2 presenters that are talking on Adale Nutalaka. Okay, so we don't have those people here. So I'm thinking either Charles or Matthias can start, and then we'll catch up with the rest later. This is just to save time so we have enough time to interact on the subject. What do you think about this?
Okay, I think that's fine by me. That's fine.
Okay,
I wouldn't mind starting, but my co-presenter is not here yet, so that still looks like a constraint to me, except if it's okay by you, I wouldn't mind. I could proceed.
Well, if Matthias doesn't mind, since he's a sole author, Do you mind starting? And hopefully Charles's co-presenter will join us in the meantime.
Okay, no problem.
All right. So we have about 5 attendees I can see here. So I'm just going to present you first to the House and tell them about what you will be speaking on, after which I'll give the floor to you to speak. So Matthias, welcome once more. Matthias is Matthias Chukwudi Isiani. He's an African urban historian, and his work is at the intersection between sociology, cultural studies, oral history, and geography. And he's exploring Africa's urban difficulties and how to sustain the environment for a resilient and comfortable human living. His major focus is on post-colonial urban cities in Nigeria and their interaction with the inhabitants. He's currently a lecturer at the Department of History and International Studies at the University of Nigeria, Nsukka, and he has 2 degrees from the same, one from University of Nigeria and another from Nnamdi Azikiwe University, Awka. He's starting his PhD at the University of Pennsylvania, and he's the Benjamin Franklin Fellow in African Studies at the same university. Thank you very much, Matthias. Welcome on board. You're going to speak to us about the Igbabor and the urban development of Onitsha City. And we really look forward to listening to your interesting topic.
Okay. Thank you, the chair and my co-presenter. I'm presenting Igbabor apprenticeship and urban development of Onitsha City. The concept of Igbabor is an Igbo word that simply means an apprentice. It's an apprentice in Igbo tone or tonation and all that. And I'm going to center my discussion on how this apprentice, we call them Igbabor, transformed or advanced the locality of Onitsha. Over time, the literature of Onitsha City has centered on the colonial infrastructures and the coming of the CMS into Onitsha as a means of its transformation by giving them schools, churches, courts, police stations, and some other transformable infrastructures in Onitsha. But there is a superficial literature on the contribution or the transformation strategies of this apprentice in Onitsha City. And how this apprentice contributed to the economic wealth, the economics, the labor, and wealth of Onitsha urban city. Of course, we all know that Onitsha has one of the major markets, main markets Onitsha. That single market alone is the largest in West Africa and contributes $3 billion annually in Anambra State, which is over 1.2 billion naira in present day Nigeria. And this main market Onitsha has a flood of people known as Nwaboi. Nwaboi simply means the apprentice itself. Why the conflage of what they are being called is Igbabor. They are now giving out the Igbabor apprentice, but their name is Nwaboi as an apprentice. Now, the thrust of this paper is to raise consciousness that despite the colonial infrastructures in Onitsha and the CMS contributions in Onitsha, that the contributions of this apprentice since the end of the Civil War in 1970 till this 2022 has metamorphosed or has even tripulated what the colonial masters did in Onitsha. For instance, at Onitsha, this Igbabor is a sort of an unwritten agreement between the parents of the mentee, which is the one boy, and the mentor, which is the teacher. It's an unwritten agreement whereby these two parties with the family of the mentee trying to nostalgize their son, whom they see as a trade-conscious person, thereby linking him with a mentor whom they wish that will train the child to be successful like the mentor. It can be 5-year agreement, it can be 6-year agreement, it can be 7 years agreement. This mentee coming to Onitsha has the consciousness or the knowledge that if I am being trained for these 7 years, that I'm also going to train another person after my successful 7 years, of which we call it Onyaya na Nwanne, which means be your brother's keeper, which is the cosmology and ideology of the Igbo people, that as you are learning trade, as you are making money through labor history, through economics, through your wealth creation, the consciousness of not leaving your brother behind should be grifted. And you will see that in Onitsha, that some of these migrants, these Mwaboi people from different diaspora to Onitsha, after they have been settled, goes back to their village or their locality or their location to pick another person, bringing the person down to Onitsha. And some of these challenges is also urban increment and population density. That as people migrate, as people move down to Onitsha, the tendency of population density tends to increase, which is far beyond what the colonial people, brought to Onitsha in terms of church, in terms of schools, and some of those things. And in my work, I try to use two major theories, which is Vosterski and stirrup urban theory. The Vosterski theory tries to be objective, that as a child, you need a teacher, that you cannot excel, just as we are teachers and all that, you cannot excel in your teaching capacity without someone teaching you the methodology and the methods of your scale. And that is the concept of Eba Boy. Eba Boy, the mentor, tries to educate the mentee on the nitty-gritty and the concepts of that trade, showing the person the blueprints, the tactics he himself has over the years acquired, thereby engaging the mentee on how to succeed in life. And the second theory about Stropper tried to examine that urban city has over the years transformed as a result of industrial revolution. And as we know, by 1857, when the CMS came to Onitsha by July 27, these people came with the idea of legitimate commerce. That as we are transforming this city, we're also transplanting the human manpower from the place we are to the new world. Some of these people who were trained in DMGS, in CKC, in St. Charles schools, came back to Onitsha to transform the city through the concept of market creation and wealth creation in Onitsha, thereby enlarging the scope of this market, Onitsha market. But these people that are apprentices, one of the significant nature of this my research is that the major cities or the major streets, the major roads in Onitsha today was constructed by these successful Nwaboyes, mentees in Onitsha, because they have acquired the wealth, they have acquired the successful wealth creation, thereby they are giving back to the city they found themselves, thereby creating streets, building houses. I would like to share one of the screen here. Look at this screen. This screen, you can see how I try to build my research on parents relative. This parent relative, you educate your mentee with the mentor. The parent or relative now goes down to the master. The master also uses Vygotsky theory to educate his mentee. From that area, the person begins to learn the trade, which is Eba Boy or Emor. From that idea of Igba boy, the person adopts the scout and stopper theory, which helps the person to urbanize the city. From that theory, you now see that the major bus stop is at the market. And the centerpiece of all these things is at Onitsha urban city, which is why Onitsha is at the center, because Onitsha city tries to have all these people engulfed in it. Now, conclusively, the United Nations organization is championing the idea of by 2030 there will be a zero poverty. This is the only zero poverty idea that people can easily inoculate in them. When we talk about education, education is not all about formal education. This is a sort of education that the United Nations is championing about in creating wealth. And by 2030, if we reinvigorate this Igba boy system, the idea of zero poverty and zero hunger will be of history in Igbo land, and by extension, Nigeria. That the United Nations idea that by 2030, that the first and the 11th goal will be achieved is through this Igba boy policy in Onitsha, and by extension in Africa urban city. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Matthias. That was a really passionate presentation, and it delves into a number of fields, and I'm really excited about it. Thanks also for keeping to time. So we will have time to ask questions, but I just want to make some comments. I'm excited that, Adam Smith himself said something similar to what you're saying, that no country can be prosperous if the people within are destitute. So we do key into this idea, this Igbo idea of being your brother's keeper, of communal growth. And that's really interesting within the development. That's a really interesting concept within the development discourse. But also your work is situated within this rural-urban migration discourse. And for example, things that really we can build on is the fact that this Ubaboyi, I hope I'm saying it right, is contributing to employment, which has really been a problem for us in the country, in Nigeria. For a long time now, we've been battling with double-digit unemployment rates, and we need ways in which these things will work. And the other thing is that it's unique in terms of entrepreneurship. So masters, the way you've put them, they have these ideas that they pass on to mentees, their Mbaboye, the apprentice itself. The only question I'll have around that is, how do you then standardize the transfer of knowledge? How is it possible? Because masters will have their various flares as to how to transfer knowledge. And how do you know that someone who's been through an apprenticeship system really gets it? But I'm not the only one to ask questions here. I'm opening the floor to everyone. So please paste your questions in the question and answer session so we can have about 5 minutes of that before we move on to the next presentation. And welcome, Professor Offiong. It's good to have you here. Yes, so we're having some feedback from the audience. They're telling us that this is a wonderful presentation and it's very passionately done, as I said. If you have any questions, we'll give about 2 minutes for you to post that in the question and answer session. You can also raise your hand. I don't know if I'll be able to give you the floor, but I'll try. If not, you can just post your question. I think questions need to be posted in the question and answer box. So please feel free to interact with the presenter. He's done a very good job.
Okay, should I comment on your question?
Yes, you may go ahead to do that. Yes, that's a very good idea.
Okay, thank you for the question. You asked about how the master or the apprentice needs to get the tactics of the master and all that. Yes, this unseen agreement between the mentee and the mentor. The significant thing there is that the master will not tell the mentee the secret and the nitty-gritty of the business until maybe the 5th year. You know, in my paper, when you read it, you see that there is a stage we call the incubation year. The master will be looking at the mentee, monitoring the mentee, sending the person to an errand, keeping money carelessly, so that he will look at if this person is actually a person to leak the secret to. Of course, in my paper, we have all these things linked to the paper, that the secret of this wealth creation or this job is at the nick of time. The master will only expose that to only the trustworthy mentees. And I'm happy that Netweight, who came to Alaba International Market in 2018, was able to see that Alaba International Market was able to metamorphose its growth to $10 billion per annually because of the Eba Boy apprenticeship. The idea of Eba Boy system and how it created wealth is that the master, even in settling the mentee, will give a mandate, quote unquote, to his apprentice that as I have done to you, so will you do to others. And the consciousness is that you go back to your locality and pick someone to learn the same trade that you have also learned, and to hide the secret of that wealth creation until the 5th or the 4th year of the mentee in the business. And then you can lick it. Thank you so much.
Thank you once again, Matthias. That's really interesting. I think you've answered the question Odinaka is asking about the stages, and I think you've touched on that from the incubation till the final stage. So what we'll do, Professor Ofiong, welcome. You are one of the presenters with Charles. So I would like to know if you're ready now to take your own paper.
Well, if
we can't hear you, Professor. Should have to unmute herself.
Okay, we are co-presenting a paper, and if it's okay by her, maybe I could do the presentation, since it seems she's having some technical problems. If she can give a go ahead, I could just proceed.
Yes, Charles, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Thank you, Prof. Okay, let me share.
Charles, so let me quickly let me present you to the House, you and your co-presenter, and then I'll give you the floor to make your intervention. So Charles is here with Dr. Ekutosi Esienofiong, who is an associate professor at the Department of History and International Studies in Calabar. She's a member of the History Society of Nigeria, and her current research touches on the church and social history. Charles Ekpo, who will be presenting the paper, he teaches peace and conflict resolution in Arthur Jarvis University, Akpabio in Nigeria. He is a junior research fellow at the African Research Institute in Budapest. He has a BA in History and an MA in Peace and Conflict Studies. And he's also a member of the History Society of Nigeria and the Society for Peace Studies and Practice. So thank you very much, Charles. Charles and Professor Ofiong, they will be talking about Beyond Cultural Veil, re-examining trade by barter among communities in Akpabio Cross River State. So welcome on board. You have the floor, Charles.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, the panelists. And I'd like to appreciate the LSA for this great opportunity. And before I commence the presentation, let me just intimate this House that this is a work in progress. So it is supposed to be an empirical study, but for this very presentation, it's the proposal that we're presenting, which is basically stating the problems, the concept theories, and then focusing more on the methodology, which is supposed to guide our field study. The topic is Beyond the Veil of Culture, re-examining the enduring practice of barter among communities in Akpabuyu, Cross River State, Nigeria. Okay, it might be interesting to some of us to know that this culture of barter still exists in this part of the country and this part of the world. But unfortunately, not much is known about the driver or drivers of this very practice. But the little that is available, the little documented information, asserts that the practice has been existing since the 1950s, and that it is basically a cultural practice which has been sustained by this crop of community in Esongba as some form of memento, some form of heritage, and that its continued existence is hinged on that very factor.
I can't hear you anymore. Can you hear us? Charles, do you think that you can speak loudly, or can we check your network? I'm sorry, I cannot hear Charles. Can the other panelists hear him? Can you indicate in the chat if you can hear him? Professor F. Young, can you hear him?
I can't hear him also. I can't hear him. I can't hear him.
Charles, we cannot hear you. Can't hear you. Charles, I don't know if you can hear me. I'm still not hearing what you're saying. So I'm just going to read along with you and try to get a grasp. Perhaps we can all do that and read along with Charles.
Good afternoon. Can you all hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can we have another person come up? Prior to the time we would check his network.
Okay.
Thank you.
Professor Offiong, can you hear me, please? Professor Offiong?
We can't hear them.
I think what we should do is take your questions, Matthias. In the question and answer section, I have about 2 or 3 questions directed at you. If we can take those questions first, and then we'll return to both Charles and Professor Offiong. Is that a good one for you, Charles? Matthias? Does that work for you, Matthias?
It works for me, just that he's still talking, and maybe some other persons at the background. I don't know how it's.
I cannot hear anybody except you right now. Can you hear other people?
No, I can't. I can't hear them.
Yes. So
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Thank you very much. What the organizers are suggesting is that since nobody can hear him, what we should do is go ahead and speak about something else. Hopefully he will join us again.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Okay. Okay.
So from the panelists, I have 2 other questions. One is from Sokima Okafo. And he's asking Matthias if you think it's still necessary for Nwaboy to still obtain a formal education to enhance the idea in business. And is it a case of traveling overseas and doing business with the wider world, or is it just informal apprenticeship? And is this enough to excel in the corporate, well, I think he means competitive world. So what's your answer to that, Matthias?
Okay. Well, Nwaboy is not only informal apprenticeship. And an Nwaboy is entitled to enhance the globe. How can we enhance the globe? Of course, we have, in all parts of the world, we have interpreters. Some persons can't even know how to speak French, German, Japanese, and all that, but they transact with those people. The basic concept is that the person has already been tutored and mentored in the skill he has championed himself about. And by doing so, if he wants to elaborate his kaleidoscope in the corporate world, there are some of these interpreters we have at Onitsha Urban City who accompany these people who doesn't have basic education to London, to Japan, to China, to trade. Until tomorrow is benefiting them. Some of these masters didn't even cross basic school, but you see them being successful in their wealth creation. How do they do that? They pay for their services and they engage directly to the corporate world through their interpreters, and they travel far and near exchanges. So Nwaboy system, you are free to obtain formal education, and you are also free that even you're informal apprentice, you're also free to enhance your scope through acquiring a third party that has formal education. And also some of these Nwaboy at Onitsha are those people that are not, quote unquote, are those people that doesn't want to go to school, but they have their basics, but they have their talent to trade. And in doing so, they pay for the services of those people that acquired formal education. And in so doing, These people have already acquired that services rendered to them, and their business are booming every day by the day. So that's the basic concept of this. And for instance, also addressing his question, we saw people today in the corporate world that are into JavaScript. Some of those people don't even have formal education. They are educated through this skill and through this information they get from JavaScript and all that, and they are even competing far better than those people that have formal education. Thank you.
Yes, Matthias, that's really interesting. Another thing that I would like you to consider in your paper, because you speak about out-migration and the transfer of these skills to other places, like when they travel to China. And I know the Federal Ministry of Labor in Nigeria, they do trade tests, so they find a way to standardize or issue certificates even for people who've qualified outside the formal education system. So you may want to consider, the strengths and weaknesses of adopting such standardization of the education system in your work. And that's a brilliant answer. Thank you very much. From Chuku Ebuka Ugu, we have, Sir, what do you have to say about harsh or wicked masters? Again, this is around that same subject of how do you know that someone's qualified to be a master, for example? And these harsh and wicked masters, that it says here, extend the continuity of Igba and the passage of knowledge. So the transfer of this secret is not done on time. And would you also encourage his apprentice to follow in his footsteps? So would such a quote unquote wicked master encourage his apprenticeship? What do you have to say to that?
Okay. The idea is that this Igba boy, immediately you come to Onitsha and you have been introduced as a Nwa boy, your master is the head. Of course, he's the head. But you have been introduced into a congregation of other masters. We are not short fault of the wickedness and the bad eggs in masters. It's in my work. Some of those people, maybe by the nick of time, the master will say he stole my money, and some other person you slept with my wife, you did this now, you just to scare the mentee away, and some of those things. The concept of the Nwa boy, immediately you have been introduced in that trade, is that in that master clique they have, you begin to watch closely, not only your master, but other masters you are also looking at, because in the market migration, when your master introduces you as his mentee, automatically you become everybody's mentee in the market. So the consciousness is that as you are serving your master, you also paying an bird eye view to what is happening with other Nwa boys, with other masters. That peradventure, if you're not lucky with your master, the knowledge you have acquired from other masters, apprentice, or other masters in the market field will see you through. Thereby, you will follow the trend and the knowledge of the wickedness of your master, which is obtainable in Onitsha City today. So some of these people, when their master tries to deviate or lay accusation upon them, you see them successfully moving ahead with what they have learned from other masters in the market. And some of the, for instance, recently at Onitsha, after 80 years of apprenticeship, a master gave the mentee just 100,000 naira, which is equivalent to just $70 only, after 7 years of apprentice. But because of the knowledge he has gathered from other masters, The other master was able to raise up to 1 million naira for the mentee, and he was able to start up his own business. The consciousness is that he has seen what the master has for him, but other masters also saw his skills and knowledge and also gifted him with some money. The idea is that as you are in this business, consciousness of this business, what you are there is to learn. Whether he's wicked or not, you are to learn. And if you grab the nitty-gritty of the business and the wealth creation, you move ahead, because what lies ahead is your career scope of competing with the wider world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthias. That's really interesting. And another observation I have is there probably is a way to situate some of these things that are happening in the Igbo culture within the broader language of entrepreneurship. And I really look forward to reading your full paper when it's ready. Now, Charles, can you now hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
We're terribly sorry. Somewhere around the statement of your problem, we lost you entirely and we couldn't hear you. We were trying to read, to follow through by reading, but that was not possible. I think since the other presenters are not here, if you don't mind summarizing the key ideas once more so that the participants can interact with your paper, is that okay by you? We're very sorry, I don't know, I think your network was bad.
Yeah, that's fine.
Thank you so much, Charles. So please go over the ideas again.
Okay, no point sharing the screen again. Let me just summarize. In a nutshell, the practice of trade by barter is still being practiced by the people of Esukumba in Akpabuyu, and there is no sufficient documentation, especially on the driving factor of that very economic practice or economic culture, as the case may be. But existing information portends that that very practice is sustained exclusively by the variable of culture. And we consider that to be dissatisfactory. We consider that to be simplistic. We consider that not to be critical, and in fact, to be reductionist in approach. Because literature suggests that for every contemporary existence of barter practice, there are either some socio-economic problems or political problems that facilitate, or necessitate such practice. So if this very case is based on culture entirely, then it is isolated, and that makes it problematic. So how do we get to contest this very dominant position? We first and foremost hinged the position on two core theories, and that's the structural functionalist theory and the symbolic interactionalist theory. While the functionalist theory agrees that culture could be a major driver of such phenomenon, the symbolic interactionalist theory argues against that. Rather than culture being a driver of such practice, rather, it is the people's activity, interaction between themselves and their community and their environment that defines culture, not the other way around. So in that case, arguably, culture cannot drive, trade by barter. But probably there are other variables, there are other ingredients, there are other elements that may be the driver of this very practice. So that's why we embark on this study. Like I said, it will be an empirical study. That means we will have to go there, see things for ourselves, document, and it's going to be a qualitative and an ethnographic study. So we will go there, we will interview at least 30 participants, observe, and then use structural, semi-structured interview guide to also talk to them and get to know the innermost explanation of why that very practice exists. And like I mentioned, we would take ethical considerations very, very importantly. And we would seek to get an approval from Arthur Jarvis University. The university is located in Akpabu, it's a distance a few miles away from this very study area. And we also survey and get to observe this very, the marketing practice, in this same ethnographic area. So we can make some comparative analysis so that we can juxtapose, so that at the end of the day, we can triangulate our data. Since these people are dominantly, I wouldn't call them illiterate, but of course they are literate because they are learned in informal education. So interview would be basically conducted in the Efik language, after which we would translate, we would code, we would process the data, we would codify, and then we will present our findings. And our analysis should be able to juxtapose existing literature, existing theories. So at the end of the day, we should know what aligns, what do not align. So anything that doesn't align, we should be able to find explanations in the field. So the purpose of our presentation in this prestigious conference was actually to bring up this idea and emphatically present our method, because we believe whatsoever we are going to get out there is dependent on how good and befitting our theory and our methods are. So we really hope to get critical comments on the suitability or otherwise of our method, and then prepare ourselves and do exploits in the field work. Thank you very much.
That's just fantastic. I really enjoyed your presentation because it's properly structured and it allowed me to think through the process with you. Well, the first comment I have has to do with your situating of this trade by barter around the 1950s. I would suspect, even though I don't know for sure, that this dates a little farther, and there's a rich literature that has emerged on the Bantu civilization, and that happened exactly around the area of Cross River, Cameroon, those areas around Western Africa where the Bantu moved out from, and they had a lot of complex economic systems going on there. So I'd like you to examine that with regards to what you're looking at now. And the other thing I think is that there must be some economic incentive to the continuation of this practice. The fact that, they found other means of exchange. Is it that, the money loses value too fast for them? And I'm really curious because I might have missed this when I couldn't hear you. What kind of commodities and services are these ethnic people exchanging among themselves? And how do they determine value of the commodities? Perhaps these are some of the questions you might need to ask. From my own perspective as an economist, some of the functions that money has, this divisibility function is very important to its usefulness in trade. So the fact that, well, I don't want to give you all of 1,000 naira, I can give you 500 out of it and get, 300 back from it, something like that. How do they then, weigh how much something is worth and collect change, exercise this property of divisibility? And how does a commodity, hold its value over time? So is it the same, that is yam worth the same thing in and out of season? These are things that pique my curiosity as an economist. Thank you so much once again, Charles. That was brilliant. Questions in the Q&A session, please feel free to interact with Charles and also to comment on their proposed methodology. So while we wait, if I get any questions, I will post them, but I don't know if you can speak to a bit, one or two of the things that I'm curious about at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. You made mention of the fact that I think I mentioned the 1956 in my introduction. Well, we have now gone to the field, and how 1956 came into the discussion is that based on existing documents, based on existing data on that practice, it is assumed that the practice has been in existence since 1956, which is in itself problematic because the population that are occupying that place have been there for centuries. In fact, that Esongba Beach was a major slave port, during the slave trade era. And they are exposed, or they were at a point in time practicing trade by barter. No doubt it was a global culture. But over time, they were, of course, introduced to alternatives to barter, from the cowrie, to when we had monetary means of exchange. So 1956 itself suggests that, that's when, they defined this very culture, which doesn't seem to align with the fact that it is culture that sustains it, because definitely it wasn't culture, that created it. There must be something. There must be something. So 1956 would be a part of, that critical area that we would examine in the field, and we would also base our analysis on. Because if people have existed for centuries and suddenly decided to practice a particular economic lifestyle in the 50s, and then decide to sustain it till this very day, and then the people in that same ethnographic area do not indulge in that same practice, there must be something. There must be something beyond culture. And that thing is what we would set out to find when we embark on our field work. And I'm very grateful for your insight on the issue of value. How do they get to value the commodities they exchange? And how do they sustain the measurement of that very value over time? Because for us in Nigeria, even between 2019 and 2022, we can feel the impact of inflation. It's everywhere. So how do they factor that in? So I'm very, very happy for this question, because it will constitute a part of our semi-structured interview guide. So I'm very, very grateful.
Fantastic, Charles. Thank you for the answers. We'll just carry on. We are missing two of our presenters, but if you don't mind, Charles and Matthias, I'm still enjoying the conversation, and we can keep it going until the time is up at 6:30. If anybody in the audience still has some questions, please feel free to put them on the question and answer box. It's still open. I also still have some questions with regards to Charles's presentation. And probably it's because I'm coming from a different disciplinary perspective. I'm really fascinated by your topic, Beyond the Veil of Culture, and the fact that you're questioning the role of culture in all of these systems. But what led you to view it from this perspective, and which alternative perspectives have you thrown out, and why?
Well, I think it was it 2020? It was some months after the ease in lockdown here in Nigeria. I think lockdown was between April and May, and I think it was about July that there was this BBC documentary of a particular cultural practice in Esongba that involved a lot of people. who were so passionate about, exchanging commodities instead of, trading, with money. So it made so much wave, and almost all the top media here in Nigeria, captured it. And I am from Akwabu, so it raised, curiosity in me. So I approached my prof and, told her, look, but this is the situation. And I told her that it doesn't really make that much sense to me, because I have not lived in that particular area, but I have been, the secondary school I attended was like, I think about 20 kilometers away from there. So I know people. In fact, during the BBC documentary, I saw people I know, who offered comments, and in fact, they were even participating in the trade. I asked people questions, preliminary questions. Is this really how this thing works? What are the incentives? And in fact, part of the interview report was that they prefer to trade within a zone. But this same set of people, if they trade with people in the neighboring communities, they use monetary exchange. So what is so peculiar about the barter? Is it really culture? And then I saw that the system or the practice began around the 1950s. And that raised more curiosity in me. It wasn't adding up. So the best way we could approach it was to gather the existing information and see how we could problematize what is in situations, and then did a lot of literature search and framed our concept, and then situated the study using those two theoretical frameworks. And then based on the gap we discovered, we were able to now define those problems and then present that method, which we think would be adequate for us to extract more information. I know those people, some of those people that granted the interview personally. So I will meet them on a personal capacity, and I will still get to hear from them, because there is this, is it Houghton effect? There's something, there is something Malinowski mentioned that has to do with the way people behave when they know that they are being observed. So the factor was there, when all these big media people came to ask them questions. So the authenticity, validity, and veracity of the information they give out may be, questioned. So those are all the factors that we considered, and then decided to embark on the study. So for now, our literature is set, our method, is set. So probably from next week, we would embark on the field work to get to know more about this exciting economic phenomenon, because it is really exciting. People, in fact, I heard my school normally announced, because I am with Dr. Jarvis University, it's part of our selling point. When we direct people now to come, we tell them, about 10 miles away from the trade by barter market. So,
well, I like your school. They're definitely taking advantage of it.
Now that is making wave, but the risk is that people may get misinformed. So that is why this study is relevant. It's very critical. In as much as we hope to promote culture, we should do it within the fringes of truth, and verifiability principle. So that's one of our motivating factors. And at the end of the day, we hope that what is on documented data would align with what we will find. But if it's not, of course, it's still even better for scholarship and research. So we are anxious to get to the field.
Oh, this is just fantastic, Charles. I mean, I continue to be fascinated by both your method and the subject. And the other thing that I think that you may want to start considering from now. You may not have the answers now, but you will as the subject goes on, especially if you keep the question at the back of your mind. What is the external validity of the lessons that you're going to learn from, this small ethnic community? Well, one thing that comes to mind is that, especially when you said that this trade happens within communities, but not among communities. So outside those communities, they don't want to do the same barter. And so you might want to think in that respect, question why this is this way, because it may mean that we may have small pockets of this kind of behaviors in other communities. So your study may have the possibility of being extended beyond the ethnic community, just to explain what's going on. But in any case, it remains absolutely important. And the other thing that is coming to my mind is the link between what you're doing and what Matthias is doing, which is finding homegrown solutions to problems, economic problems that could affect anyone. Especially this question of how to retain value in a particular, means of exchange. So today now, anyone who's not questioning, what we know about economic exchange is not being realistic. We have all sorts of means of exchange coming up every day, non-fungible tag, all sorts of means of exchange, tokens, and what have you. And this probably will feed into that broader aspect of how do people exchange and how does the society bring value? Because one of the things about exchange is that it creates value. So when I give you something, it means I don't value it as much as what I want to get from you. And so there's that value creation within the exchange that's going to be very important to your work. And so I think it's very exciting because, like you've been saying, we've been accepting imposed ideas from other, outside of our own cultures for quite a while now. And it's very interesting that both of you are now exploring something that's homegrown and offering it. So I would very much like you to view this as not just a small study of the ethnic community or the apprenticeship system, but as something you ask yourself, what is Africa teaching the world through these systems? And I can see Matthias's hand going up. I'd like to give him the floor now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And Charles, thank you for your presentation. That's a nice one. And I really, enjoyed it. My question is to the chair, the organizer, Dr. Omolala. I heard you said you're an economist, and I have something that is bothering me that I would like you to really tell me your own side of this thing. This concept of Eba Boy apprentice, I observed, consciously observation, that these apprentices, in the course of migration, when they migrate down to some of the cities that employ them as apprentices, Lagos, Onitsha, Abuja, places that they now find their greener pastures, quote and unquote, I observe that there is a scarcity or poor scale of preference from where they migrated from. There is a sort of economics, an economic damage from where they migrated from. For instance, some of them will just come back, erect houses, and then travel back to their location without solving the basic need of that particular place they migrated from. And as an economist, how do you measure the economic valuation of this place that they migrated from? Because I observe that some of their skill and their wealth is being triggered to that place that they saw their abode or or their greener pastures. So let me hear from you your economic evaluation of where they migrated from and what is people, share your thoughts.
Matthias, that's actually a very good question. And it borders around the subject of what we call in economics redistribution of labor. And because labor responds to wages, to incentives, they'll go to where those economic incentives are higher. So if I can make more money by being in Lagos, I'm not going to stay in about any other community where I can make less money. And that's pure economic behavior. So utility seeking, satisfaction seeking economic behavior, and it is rational. That's the limit to where I can be straight with you. After that, things get a bit fishy. The reason is that for economists, they're always what you call trade-offs. So if you make one choice, you make it at the expense of another. And so, of course, this person has to weigh all of these trade-offs when he's making the decision. Should I go to Lagos? What do I leave behind? Okay. So if the question you're asking is, how does the community keep the person? I'm a bit liberal in my thoughts. So I'm not the kind of economist that will push for restraints. Government should make this policy and make people do that, or the community should force people to stay. I'm not within that line of thought. So I would like people to make their own private choices based on returns to them. And if that's the case, any economy, any community, any place that wants to retain people or wants to maintain that interaction has to find an incentive system to keep it going. Sometimes these incentive systems are social, so you tie them to the church. I know Igbo people are often home for Christmas because, everybody is required by tradition to do that. And there's nothing the matter with that. It's actually a home. Where I come from, harvest season, it's akin to you being a bastard. It's akin to you not understanding that your family needs you. So those kind of social systems can encourage people. I wouldn't want to say tie because that's a bit constraining, but can encourage people to continue to participate. And you have to think about, and then there are also benefits of the rural community. I live at this time in a rural community, and some of the things like the fresh air and the ambience and the quiet of the rural community are really incentivizing to me to stay where I am and, not respond to economic incentives to go elsewhere. So, if that's the objective of the community, those are some of the incentive mechanisms that can be put in place. I don't know if that answers you properly. If not, you can bring the question.
It did. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, I can't see any new questions from the panel. I'm running out of questions. Much as I've enjoyed this, I really don't want to bombard you with new problems. I know you have enough research problems on your table. So if you want to give some final comments, and then we can close the session. Charles, any final thoughts you want to share, or Matthias, or anybody?
Okay. Actually, there is an aspect of Matthias' study that I think resonates with the guild system as it was practiced in Europe at a point in time. People tending to protect a trade secret. Of course, that's what he said, that oftentimes the mentor may want to protect an aspect of the trade secret until probably the 5th or the 6th year, when the mentee is closer to attaining independence. And that has some connections with what was obtainable in Europe during the medieval period. And he also made mention of something about brotherhood, African brotherhood. That the practice of internship system is hinged on that very ideology. I cannot pinpoint any particular African society, any particular African community that doesn't have an aspect of that concept of brotherhood, though in different forms. Of course, we have here. And the funny thing is that they always come with adage, wise sayings, cliches, and the kind of those things that shows you that you are not in isolation. You can't live without others. And I believe that entails that if you cannot live without others, you're supposed to help them in a way you can. And it resonates with that culture. So maybe exploring some of those thoughts and theories in the ethnographic sense can enrich the depth of the literature. I'm just it's a suggestion. In fact, we know of Ubuntu, we know of all these Omoluabi, a lot of them that tends to highlight this very important element of brotherhood. And he mentioned Onitsha as the heart of this apprenticeship system. I tend to be curious because I know even in Calabar, the capital of Cross River State, you have parts or segment of areas or streets that are dominated by Igbo traders, and this system is what they operate. You may go to a particular shop, you find out that there are some maybe 4 to 5 interns, and they have specific roles they play, and eventually you go there sometime and he has been settled. That's the word they use. He has been settled, meaning a shop has been secured, and a worth of good items have been freely given to the person. So the person is expected to start his or her life, and after a particular point in time, get to bring in more people too, where he or she can train. Why I'm bringing this is that oftentimes the kind of businesses that the mentors were involved in is not those kind of businesses that you will need to secure a particular secret. It may just be trade in items like food, spare parts. And the interesting thing is that some of them are very smart, such that I think that's an aspect you may also factor in. The settlement sometimes do not come from the top. It may come from the top at the ceremonial level. You discover that some of these people are they also do save money, whether through legal or illegal means. And oftentimes, they have their own shops, elsewhere that the master may not even know. And, that becomes another part of the trade secret, for them. And they keep it secret until they're settled. So eventually, some of them would even, another important element apart from, the bottom-top settlement, may be the issue of, settling these same people within that same, geographic area. Because they tend to go with a lot of customers. So sometimes, the Oga will be complaining, and they tend to, the relationship between the mentor and the mentee, at the post-settlement period, how is it? Because for the ones I know, it's not always cordial. Because some of them may have developed some, cordial relationship with some of the major customers. And as they're being settled, they are living with, a plethora, a depth of, these customers. And by so doing, there's a disruption in the level of patronage, and you seem to see a lot of problems. So in as much as this system is constructive, I think there are also disruptive, areas that may, well, I know you can't finish everything in one walk. So I'm just giving you this in so that, in your subsequent studies, we can't hear you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Charles. I'm very happy for this little observations, and it's very nice. But I want to address one thing that you mentioned, and that's the issue of why I centered it at Onitsha. Of course, I know that Igbo people are in diaspora. They're in Calabar, as you mentioned, they're in Lagos, they are here, they are there. But my focus on Onitsha is aftermath of the Nigerian Biafran War. There was no much casualties or much destructive tendency in infrastructure in Calabar and Lagos than the eastern central states of Onitsha. Of course, you know that Onitsha main market was destroyed and was dazzled at the floor. Of course, you know that even the Onitsha Niger bridge was also brought down. After the war, the people that Yakubu Gowon employed to reconstruct in his so-called 3R, quote unquote, began what we call a vendetta on the Igbo people that fought the war. Their reconstruction neglected how Onitsha was, including the urban plan of Onitsha. Even the road planning of Onitsha was truncated till today because of how they wanted to revenge on the Igbo people for fighting the war. Now, in the market, Onitsha, being the largest market, one of the largest in West Africa, the people now began what I tagged the bottom-top approach of economic wealth creation. The government didn't give them anything. The people now began bottom-top tendencies of creating wealth at Onitsha. That by today, those people that created the wealth did that on their own through the Eba Boy apprenticeship. But when we talk of Calabar and Lagos, of course, we all know Lagos, the colonial masters, infrastructure and all that has already set that place. But Onitsha, after the war, used bottom-top approach to be what they are today. That single market alone is generating $3 billion annually and over 1.2 trillion in Nigeria. And the highest market that gives revenue in Anambra and the whole of Eastern Nigeria today. My focus is post-Civil War reconstruction and how this Eba Boy apprenticeship try to strive that people, the Igbo people also, as you mentioned about Calabar, Lagos, and all that, the Igbo people had this consciousness of brotherhood that ignited the transformation and advancement of this Igbo place at whole, and which Onitsha urban city is a cause. Thank you so much.
So sorry, it seems my
really
observation.
Please, I'm sorry to interrupt. Charles, go ahead.
Okay, it seems my observation was beyond the scope of his work. But like I said initially, you can just put them down. You may, in the next 5 years, become the most famous expert in that very area. And that means you have to consider, bits and pieces of that very practice. So well done.
Yes, really interesting discussion. And since you're raising bits and pieces that can form new papers, maybe you're coming back to LSA next session to talk. I can see also another aspect that you're talking about, which is the private sector contribution to development. And in the new literature in economics, there's a huge recognition of private sector driven development that you're talking about now. And so it's really nice to observe that that's happening through this, through the EBOs and then through this apprenticeship system. So that's another way you can situate your work. You know, now moving beyond development at the community level to aggregate level impacts. You know, you are talking now of infrastructure that, you know, private individuals are delving into infrastructural development that ordinarily should be within the purview of, you know, public funding. So this is really interesting stuff. As Matthias, as Charles said, you don't have to end it all in this paper, but you have so much, you know, great ideas coming from the work you've presented today. I think that I speak for everyone when I say that you've done the work of 5 people. The 2 of you have held this session captive in the absence of the rest of the panelists. I'm really grateful that you made my work so simple for me, and you brought on these very rich and interesting discussions. I've really enjoyed myself. I look forward to interacting with you again in the future as scholars, and thank you very much for being part of this panel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Professor Ophion, thank you very much too. It's good to have everyone here, and all the best going forward. I'll now close the session.
Thank you very much.
Bye for now.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Cheers, everyone.